Does that sound good to you guys? Okay, great. So we're going to stay with that. So full squat, again, you've got the understood core control, axial elongation, but we're going to say, well, you know, yeah, we're still squatting. So alignment and weight bearing of the lower extremities. Okay. Heel raise. Okay, so we've got our core control, axial elongation, our breathing. We know it's not organization of head, neck, and shoulders. We know it's not spine articulation. Right? So we know we're not at movement integration, really. It's a pretty straightforward task. So again, we are left with alignment and weight bearing of the lower extremities. Okay? To get you thinking about in our discussion times, after we do our exercises, after we do our labs, in our discussion times is when we're kind of talking about this sort of thing, or you've already got it. You guys are lucky enough to already have it in your manuals, but you're going to be ready for the next weekend when you have to write all of this in yourself. So this is a good primer for you. Goalpost on the wall. Okay, so we're into something else now, right? And what do you guys think? So we're really talking about upper extremities, right?
It's the neck, head, and shoulder.
Right, organization of head, neck, and shoulder. I should have probably done that in another color. Now, long sit, and I think I will. My lovely tone of white. Here we go. I've got it. So I'll do that in a different color, so it's just more recognizable for you guys to just look quickly. And I would just suggest that you do it this way in your workbooks as well. Quick recognition that we've gone on to something different. That here in this group, if you're seeing deficits in these 3 tests in a row, you're already narrowing down your group of exercises, right? And now, what do we have that addresses the upper extremity? We're starting to think about that with goalpost on the wall. We've shifted gears a little bit. Long sit is really just your core control and axial elongation because we are not getting into organization of head, neck, and shoulders. You might be able to argue the case for alignment of the lower extremities, but it's not weight bearing. We're seated. It's not movement integration. We've already got the breathing and the core control, axial elongation. Again, we're looking in general at groups of exercises that we're going to be considering, groups that we're knocking out of consideration. That's just as important as narrowing down to the groups that are in consideration. All right, so that takes care of us so far. So, in the half squat, well, in all of these, we're going to have to come up with something for the chair, for the mat, for the reformer, for the trapeze table, and for the ladder barrel spine corrector, because that's one of the filters for creating your program, is one exercise on each piece of apparatus. Now, so far, you've got repertoire from principles, from SR1 and SR2. As you go through 3, 4, 5, and 6, you're going to be adding on exponentially. So in today's lecture, we're not going to worry if we don't have anything yet under each classification because we don't have all the repertoire yet. But by the end, you will have plenty of repertoire to fit all of those classifications. So this is the time now, while you don't have that much, to create your format, to look at this, and now you can be filling in each weekend. Get yourself to sit down, think about it, process what's going on in these movements. That's where the note-taking is going to be so important in the upcoming discussion times. All right, so we've got our half squat. And this is going to be kind of like, you know, a little pop quiz for the participants here to see what you remember. But does anything pop into your head that would address alignment and weight bearing of the lower extremities that would have some disassociation of the hips and require some stabilization of the trunk that's on the chair?
Double leg.
Double leg pump, excellent. Okay, so we're off and running, right? we've got double leg pump. What else have we learned so far in the chair? There was nothing in principles. Last week, so double leg pump was the first thing we started with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then last time we got together, we got the lateral flexion, we got the mermaid, we got the scapular work, we got the beginning of our prone extension into swan, right? So
That's it.
that's pretty much it. All right, that's okay. And then we're going to move on. So on the mat is the greatest amount of repertoire that you have at this point in time. Excuse me, I gotta get my cup of tea for that morning throat. Okay, so mat. What are we thinking about for mat?
For disassociation of the hips, we have
Femur
dead
arc.
bug and femur
Dead
arc.
bug, femur arcs, good. I'm just going to put them here as DB/FA. Those two typically are going to go together. Your dead bug first. Once they show enough stability and disassociation, you're moving on to femur arcs, right? So you're going to kind of understand that. Now, as we think about that, dead bug and femur arc is a progression of dead bug.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're looking at your weeks, week 1, week 6, week 12, or beginner, intermediate, advanced, how you're looking at those programs, and your first, it could be dead bug, and then you move on to femur arc. Typically, you're going to move faster than that from dead bug to femur arc. Typically, it does not take that long unless somebody is very, very debilitated. Okay, so with that said, anything else? Anything else that you can think of?
Would it have to do? I would think that knee openings. That's a disassociation.
That's
of the
disassociation
hip
and
spinal
stabilization.
movement.
Great.
Book
So
opening.
we've got our bent knee, right? So
Right.
bent knee openings. So you were saying book openings. Was this what you were meaning?
Yes.
Okay, right. Because book openings.
Oh,
will be
book
what?
openings are these. Okay, you're
Right,
Okay.
it's going to be addressing more mobilization of the spine. Right, okay. So bent knee openings, great, and we're rationalizing that that's going to help us with the disassociation of the hips. Now, we're really talking about a very sagittal plane movement, right, which bent knee openings isn't really. So yes, you can rationalize it, but what would be even better that really relates to the functional movement in maybe a foreign environment that we've learned in Principles S1, S2. So, quadruped has got that flexion extension with a lot of, this is actually getting into dynamic stabilization. So for the PTs who are thinking about, dynamic stabilization exercises, this is sort of a quintessential one. Your quadruped is going to address the disassociation, the stabilization in a pretty challenging way though, but we're just listing, we're not putting it into week 1, week 2, week 3. We kind of went over that in our little mini lecture last time, right? So you guys are good with that. But I want you to recognize as we're writing it down, we're going from very basic to very challenging. Why is this basic?
You have gravity assisting you.
Well,
and-
not really. Not
Well, with the
necessarily.
stabilization of the
with the
spine.
stabilization of trunk, but you're working against gravity to
Right.
lift that leg. So you got to be kind of careful about,
How I word that,
Right.
and be very specific.
But what's really even more important about the dead bug and femur arcs is that you're on your back. You've got a ton of support, huge base of support. As in the picture of turning them over and putting them into quadruped, now that base of support has gone from your back on the floor to your hands and your knees. So that's a really huge difference. So just kind of thinking of it, that makes it kind of quick and easy.
Okay.
Is if you think of base of support and how low is that center of gravity towards the floor. So in quadruped, we're picking the center of gravity up away from the floor by the length of that person's arms and the length of their femurs. That's how far we're lifting it up. We lift it up even more when we go to a standing position. All right, so there's your incremental kind of increase in challenge. So we've got quadruped. Okay, great. Anything else that you can think of? So we're looking at the disassociation of the hips, but also, as Tana pointed out, with the bent knee openings, sure, we've got that stabilization of the spine. So even something like if somebody's having a hard time learning how to disassociate their hips from their pelvis, it can be very, very, very instructive to teach them pelvic lock. And why is that? Why would that be helpful to them, to teach them pelvic lock? What are we doing there? Are we allowing the legs to follow the pelvis?
No, we're disassociating
Right.
the pelvis, but we're not moving the legs, we're moving the
Right.
pelvis. So that would
Coming
be a
at it.
very basic place to start.
Right, and so since we're coming at it from an entirely different place than you are looking at the movement, you've got a really good way to get in, sort of a backdoor way to get in there to do your re-education of their nervous system, because it's something that they don't recognize. This is a whole new movement potentially for them, to get that movement of the pelvis around a fixed femur, because very often it's the pelvis that's more fixed and the femur that's doing more of the movements. It's most of our movements are in that sort of open chain of the leg. Right? Okay, great. So we've got pelvic lock now. Okay, so did that open up some new sort of vistas or possibilities for you in the way of thinking about what else might work? Okay, great. So anything else pop into your head? So you've got the list in front of you of all the exercises you've done. You've got your manuals. Have those manuals out. Look at the page that's got the index of all the exercises that you've done. So I'm going to throw out, just for time, the bridging. Bridging is going to require...
I was wondering if it, because you do disassociate, even though it's articulation of your spine.
Right. You still have that disassociation of your movement of the femur from the pelvis, and you've got your trunk stability in a challenging position. So we can look at bridging. We can rationalize that. Okay. Do you remember, and this is something that you probably were pretty well totally saturated by the time you got to this exercise in principles, and unless you've gone back and really looked at your principles manual over and over again, as I've been encouraging you to do every weekend, here's my little plug, leg pull front requires a great deal of stability of the rib cage as it connects to the pelvis. And it definitely requires you to be able to disassociate that leg in a very, very challenging position. So here's where we can talk about against gravity, and we can talk about gravity providing resistance for that leg lift, and gravity also providing resistance just for maintaining that position. And we've got our small base of support. We kind of in our foreign environments, we've got a lot of different things satisfied with that leg pull front. It's a great exercise. Well, there's none of them that aren't great exercises, right?
Right.
Right. There we go. Here's my choir. Okay. So that's a pretty darn good start. We're going to say that's a pretty darn good start. Let's move on to reformer. So sort of our again, quintessential reformer exercise for disassociation at the hip, knee, and ankle. You got it, footwork. So I'm just going to put FW. Footwork is so useful to us because it's so helpful in so many different ways. We've got the big base of support, so it's going to be something you're thinking about early on in the program, if they're able to do it, if they don't have any ankle, knee, or hip precautions that would preclude it. But as long as they're cleared for it, footwork is incredibly, incredibly helpful for the stabilization of the pelvis and the lumbar spine while there's a disassociation of the hips.
Feet and straps
And getting
as
hold.
well.
Feet and straps, great. Okay, we're on a roll. What else?
What about the supine arm and ab series? Because you are in that, you're on your supine, and your legs are in tabletop.
Right, so the legs are in tabletop. This is a really good question, and this is the kind of problem solving. Excellent question, thank you. I couldn't have planted it better. So
I know you two talk about it.
so the act